Welcome back to the channel. Today's story is not just something you watch, it is something you feel. It is one of those moments that reminds us how fragile life is, how powerful kindness can be, and how a single human voice can carry the weight of many silent hearts. This is the true and emotional story of a nurse who dedicated an original song to children she lost, and by the time the final note faded, there was not a single dry eye left in the room. The hospital was unusually quiet that evening. The kind of quiet that does not feel peaceful, but heavy. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above long hallways that had seen too much. Too many rushed footsteps, too many whispered prayers, too many moments where hope hung by the thinnest thread. For most people, a hospital is a place you visit briefly and leave behind. For nurses, it becomes a second world. A place where days blur together and emotions are carefully folded away so the work can continue. Her name was Emily. She had been a pediatric nurse for nearly 12 years. 12 years of tiny hands gripping her fingers. 12 years of brave smiles hiding fear. 12 years of children who trusted her without question. And 12 years of loss that never truly leaves you, no matter how strong you try to be. Emily was known on her floor as the calm one. The nurse who always spoke gently. The nurse who knelt to a child's eye level instead of towering over the bed. The nurse who learned favorite cartoon characters, bedtime routines, and silly songs just to make a long night feel shorter. What most people did not know was that music was the first language Emily ever loved. Long before scrubs and stethoscopes, there was a guitar in her hands and melodies in her head. She never planned to share her music at work. The hospital was not a stage, and she was not there to perform. But sometimes, late at night, when machines beeped softly and parents slept in uncomfortable chairs, she would hum. Nothing loud, nothing polished, just enough to fill the air with something warmer than fear. Children listened, parents noticed, and slowly, without her realizing it, music became part of how she cared. There was one patient who changed everything. His name was Lucas. He was 7 years old, with messy hair that refused to stay combed and eyes far older than they should have been. Lucas had been fighting a rare illness for most of his life. He knew the hospital better than most adults. He knew which nurses brought extra blankets, which doctors explained things kindly, and which hallways echoed the least at night. Emily and Lucas bonded over music. He loved asking her questions about songs. Why do sad songs sometimes sound beautiful? How does a song make someone cry without touching them? One night, when the pain was particularly bad, Lucas asked her if she could write a song just for him. Not a famous one. A real one. Something that would stay even if he couldn't. Emily promised she would. She wrote quietly at home after long shifts, exhaustion fighting inspiration. The song was simple. It talked about stars that never really disappear, about light traveling even when the source is gone, about how being remembered is a kind of forever. She never got the chance to sing it to Lucas. He passed away 2 days before she finished it. That was not the first child Emily lost. But it was the one that broke the dam she had built inside herself. Over the next year, more children passed. Some suddenly. Some after long battles that drained everyone involved. Each loss left a mark. A name she could not forget. A laugh that still echoed in her memory. A bed that felt too empty when she walked by. Emily did what nurses are trained to do. She kept going. She showed up. She comforted families even when her own heart felt like it was splintering. And she kept writing. Each song carried pieces of different children. A line inspired by a girl who loved butterflies. A melody shaped by a boy who dreamed of being an astronaut. A chorus built from whispered conversations at 3 a.m. when hope felt small but stubborn. Music became the only place where Emily allowed herself to feel everything she could not show during her shifts. The hospital decided to hold a small memorial event. Nothing public. Just staff, a few families, and a quiet room with folding chairs and candles. It was meant to be a moment of remembrance, a way to honor children who had passed and the people who cared for them. Someone suggested having music. Someone else mentioned Emily. When they asked her if she would sing, she almost said no. She had never performed her own music in front of anyone from work. These people knew her as a nurse, not as someone who cried over lyrics written at a kitchen table. But something told her this was not about fear or comfort. It was about keeping a promise she had made, not just to Lucas, but to all of them. On the evening of the memorial, the room filled slowly. Parents held hands. Nurses sat shoulder to shoulder, uniforms replaced by simple clothes, vulnerability no longer hidden behind professionalism. Photos of children rested on a table at the front. Smiling faces. School pictures. Hospital snapshots where bravery showed in small ways. Emily walked to the front with her guitar. Her hands shook. Her throat felt tight. For a moment, she just stood there, looking at the faces in front of her. Faces that had known joy and devastation in equal measure. Faces that did not need perfection. They needed truth. She took a breath and began to speak. She said she was not singing as a performer. She was singing as someone who had been changed forever by the children in that room. She said the song was for the ones who could not be there, and for the ones who carried them forward every day. Her voice cracked before she even played a note. Then she started. The first chord was soft, almost hesitant. Her voice followed, gentle but steady. The lyrics spoke of small hands leaving big impressions, of courage that taught adults how to be brave, of love that does not end when life does. The room grew still. No coughing. No shifting chairs. Just listening. As the song continued, emotion moved through the room like a wave. Parents bowed their heads, tears falling freely. Nurses who had held themselves together for years finally let go. Some closed their eyes. Some stared at the photos as if the children were listening too. Emily reached the chorus, and her voice grew stronger. Not louder, but fuller. It was the sound of someone who had carried pain and turned it into something that could be shared. The words spoke of meeting again in memories, in songs, in quiet moments when love feels close. It was not a goodbye. It was a promise. By the final verse, Emily was crying as she sang. She did not stop. She did not apologize. She let the tears fall and kept going. The guitar trembled slightly, but the melody held. When she sang the last line, her voice softened, almost a whisper, as if she were tucking each child in one last time. The song ended. For a few seconds, no one moved. No applause. No sound at all. Then someone sobbed openly. Then another. The silence broke into shared grief, raw and real. People stood and embraced. Parents hugged nurses who had cared for their children. Nurses cried in each other's arms, finally seen not just as professionals, but as humans who loved deeply. Emily stepped back, overwhelmed. She had not expected this. She had written the song to survive her own grief. She had not realized how many others needed the same release. After that night, the song did not disappear. Families asked for recordings. Nurses asked for copies of the lyrics. Some parents said they listened to it on the hardest days, when the absence felt unbearable. The song became something bigger than Emily. It became a shared memory, a shared healing. Emily still works at the hospital. She still loses patients, because that part of the job never goes away. But she sings more now. Sometimes in rooms. Sometimes in hallways. Sometimes just to herself after a long shift. She understands now that caring does not end with medicine. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can give is to witness someone's life and carry it forward in your own way. That night, a nurse did not just sing a song. She gave grief a voice. She turned tears into connection. And she reminded everyone in that room that love does not disappear when someone is gone. It changes form. It becomes memory. It becomes music. And sometimes, it becomes a song that makes everyone cry, not because of sadness alone, but because of how deeply it proves that those children mattered. After that evening, something subtle but powerful changed within the hospital walls. It was not something written in policy or announced in meetings. It was something felt. Nurses spoke a little softer to one another. Doctors lingered a moment longer in patient rooms. Parents seemed less alone, even in their grief. The song had done something medicine could not. It had opened a door that many did not realize had been locked. Emily did not consider herself brave for singing that night. In fact, she felt exposed. For days afterward, she avoided conversations about it, unsure how to respond when coworkers thanked her with tears in their eyes. She returned to her routine, to charting, medication schedules, gentle reassurances, and long nights. But she noticed something different in herself. The weight she had carried alone felt slightly lighter, as if shared sorrow had somehow divided itself among many shoulders. One afternoon, a mother stopped her in the hallway. She was holding a small stuffed rabbit, worn and faded. Her eyes were red, but calm. She told Emily that the song had helped her explain loss to her other children. She said the lyrics gave them words when none existed. She thanked Emily not as a nurse, but as someone who understood. Emily listened, nodded, and hugged her. No medical training prepared her for moments like that, yet they felt just as important as anything else she did. Word of the song slowly traveled beyond the hospital. A short clip from the memorial, recorded quietly by a staff member, found its way online. It was never meant to go public, but people shared it anyway. The video quality was simple. No dramatic lighting. No editing. Just a nurse, a guitar, and a room full of raw emotion. Comments began to appear from strangers who had never set foot in that hospital. Parents who had lost children. Adults who remembered being sick as kids. Healthcare workers who felt seen for the first time. Emily struggled with the attention. She did not want the focus to be on her. She worried about turning something sacred into something consumed. But she also read messages late at night from people who said the song helped them breathe on days when grief felt suffocating. That was something she could not ignore. She decided to share the full recording, not for recognition, but for remembrance. She dedicated it to every child whose name lived in her heart. She made it clear that the song belonged to everyone who needed it. And people listened. In cars. In bedrooms. In quiet moments when memories surfaced without warning. Back at the hospital, a new patient arrived. Her name was Sophia. She was 5 years old and loved to draw suns in every picture, no matter the scene. She was scared of needles and asked too many questions, the kind that come from trying to understand a world that suddenly feels unfair. Emily found herself humming again, softly, while adjusting blankets or checking vitals. Sophia listened closely and asked if the song was about stars. Emily smiled and said yes. In a way, it was. She did not promise Sophia forever. She promised presence. She promised honesty. She promised to sing if it helped. And when nights were long and fear crept in, Emily sang. Not the memorial song, but gentle tunes, familiar melodies, sounds that said you are not alone right now. Emily understood something she had not before. Music was not just about grief. It was about connection in the present moment. It was about acknowledging fear without letting it win. It was about giving children something that belonged only to them, even if everything else felt out of control. Months passed. Life continued in its uneven rhythm of hope and heartbreak. Some children went home. Some did not. Emily continued to write, but differently now. Her songs no longer lived only in sadness. They carried gratitude, resilience, and moments of joy that existed even in the hardest places. One evening, after another long shift, Emily sat alone in the break room. She thought about Lucas, about the promise she never fully kept, yet somehow honored. She realized that the song had reached him in its own way, through the people who loved him and remembered him. She believed, quietly, that he knew. The hospital held another memorial the following year. This time, families asked for the song. Emily sang again, still emotional, still human, but no longer afraid of her vulnerability. Tears flowed once more, but there was also something new in the room. A sense of unity. A shared understanding that grief, when expressed, becomes something we can carry together. Emily never stopped being a nurse. She never stopped losing patients. But she stopped believing that strength meant silence. She learned that compassion could be loud, shaky, imperfect, and still powerful. She learned that sometimes healing does not mean fixing what is broken. Sometimes it means honoring what was loved. And somewhere between hospital rooms and quiet chords, Emily found a way to keep every child with her. Not in pain, but in purpose. Not in sorrow alone, but in song. If this story moved you, take a moment to remember someone you have lost, or to appreciate someone still here. Share this video with someone who needs to know they are not alone. And remember, even in the quietest places, love has a voice.